some sort of fix, a workaround, that's the word, where that's what we all live with these days. It's a workaround. Apparently the sound isn't as good on the workaround, so can everybody make sure that they are speaking into their microphones and we have it close to, and I think they work best when you're going slightly down on them. I think it's a possibility that, yeah, we'll see. Would you like to speak today? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
A little bit more.
I need to project.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that.
It's not a matter for me, but I don't know if my other friend might want to just turn around. I know that the papers appear to be visible, but I don't know whether it's legible on an HD version. That would seem to be an odd thing to have happen, but that's maybe something to sort out.
Oh, the angle's changed, doesn't it? Oh, because we are from a webcam now.
I know that has been a problem with the previous inquiry, but it doesn't look like it's actually visible.
It is not visible on the webcast, sir. It's the highest quality we will get, and it's even worse on YouTube. So there is no prospect of any pertinent information there on webcast.
Even if they could read it, they wouldn't be able to see your face because it's so blurred that nobody would know who's writing it up anyway.
Yeah, well, they probably could work it out.
Are you okay, or have you got any concerns? Or?
No, I mean, I didn't until this but because I suppose I'm only thinking, I don't think anyone can see it now, but I suppose later could someone, expand it and take photographs and look, but actually, I don't think I'm worried if anyone does read it. I don't think there's anything I'm writing this. But it could be.
We're probably going to hear it all anyway, aren't we?
Exactly. Yeah. I'm not writing secret notes about anyone, so I think it's okay.
I think the cartoons might be the issue.
Yeah, the doodles. Okay, not Mr. Tucker, Mr. Stedman Jones.
Thank you, sir. Hopefully people can hear me, but I will try to speak into the
very clear at the moment.
Yeah, good. Good afternoon, Mrs. Gray. Now, with the important, I don't want to call it a direction, but the comment that we need to cut to the chase as much as possible and try to, get through. I'm going to turn now to sustainability issues, and we know this is addressed in section 9.1 of your proof, and you talk in there about the lack of robust connections for NMUs, I'm going to call them non-motorized users between the sites and surrounding areas, and you cover the fact that there isn't, in your view, good connections between the sites and the various different going in the various different directions from the site. Just on the connectivity, if I can put it that way, is there anything that you want to particularly draw the inspector's attention? But again, just remembering that we're doing this as pertinently as possible, if I can put it that way.
Okay. I will skip through regulatory references. I think it's probably enough in the proof.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to cover stuff that's in your proof. The inspector's read all of that, so.
And we'll read it again.
I think the AL1 master plan is worth looking at CD 1906B.
Sorry, CD 19.06B.
19.06B.
Is this in our miscellaneous?
It's not in folder one, is it?
Yeah, it's the third document in the second folder, so it's 19.06B master plan.
Where is it? Which CD is it in?
It's in the second folder, so it's in that miscellaneous folder with a number of different.
Additional. Oh yeah, there we are.
Yeah, it's the AL1 master plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I wanted to point out here was in the context of a design for a continuous cycleway along the A5 or shared use pathway, as defined in the emerging LC WIP. So that defines the need for a
Cycling, walking and infrastructure plan.
correct, which is at 63.31 if it's required. Defines the need for a 3-metre continuous shared use pathway along the A5 from south of Tove to Field Lane turn, that's the road to Caldecott, north of the site roundabout as a desirable future outcome. And then just as a bit of context, at page 8 of the LC WIP, they tell us that the 20 minutes is the length of time most people are prepared to walk to work. Okay, so back now to CD 1906B. What I wanted to point out there was the key bottom left.
You mean, bottom left on the plan, yeah.
It is actually, I think it's actually in the bundle as well. That's easy. So what we have here is a shared use.
It's 8.08.
I think it might be.
Well, we've got it, so let's stick to what we're looking at.
Well,
The point is,
So the point is there is not a continuous shared use pathway going on that master plan.
from
So if you look from Tove, you can see from the pinch point, there is a green shared use pathway. And that goes up to the point at which zone 2 kind of coalesces with the A5. It then turns right into the site towards zone 4. Then we continue on northwards, but that's just a footway. And then we have a slightly incoherent shared use pathway again into the site. But you'd have to get off your bike again and walk further north up to Sheffield Lane or Caldecott Lane. So that's what's showing on the master plan. There is a point in conditions that I want to come to later about that. The green dotted line that heads off east towards the football pitches.
Sorry, you said you want to raise a point on conditions. Perhaps let's just do it now. So
Let's
we
do it
can,
now,
yeah.
Is actually in the D section 106, which is at 90.15,
90.15.
and it's 4.4 revenue mod 4.
we're in the actual 106 itself.
Yeah, so 90.1, it's a draft deed.
And then within it,
And within it, it says that basically access to delivery of accessible football pitches, i.e. using that pathway, is
sorry, which page are we on?
page 15 in the hard copy. Will follow practical completion of development zones 1, 2, and 3.
Can you just hold on a second?
So just make sure that
Where, which
Okay,
paragraph number?
So it's section 4.4, Roman numeral 4,
Oh, include
point B.
B. Following practical completion.
Yep. Then, until then, there's a restriction on the use of that shared use green line.
Just read 4.4. What this is, just saying what the context of what this is. So this is the owner company.
this is in relation to the football club.
Land.
It's in relation to that pathway. I mean, it's to serve the site and the football club, but the point is that there's
Pathway
an
just
encumbrance on it
described, yeah.
until all of those zones are completed and signed off, practical completion. Right, so I'd like to direct you to appendix A.
So what's the significance of that? Can you just
Yeah,
explain?
so what does it you think it should say instead?
Because I think it should say instead, but I don't think it should be an encumbrance if the scheme is to be coherent and to promote sustainability. Then having to wait until all 3 zones are built out is could potentially create quite a long wait for people to be able to access those facilities.
Right, let me just read this. Okay, so you're basically saying it should be from
From
the outset, from the first occupation.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to direct you to appendix A. Now, there is an errata sheet.
Oh, so apologies, yes, I should have said this at the start, and there's a shorter errata sheet on the proof, which.
And in order to just sort of develop this idea of NMU connectivity.
It might be easier for us to understand, or for me to understand, if when you, rather than take us to these documents first, if you could say what your point is, and then take us to the document, because otherwise we're going to look at the documents thinking, well, what are we looking for? So if you could say, my concern or my point is, and then we can look at the documents to see it, and then it's easier to understand what you're actually looking at.
No
I
problem.
guess that would be helpful, thanks.
Okay, so what I want to show you by pointing you to this document is the proximity of particularly of the sustainable urban extension in relation to the site.
You mentioned, I think, in your summary proof, a distance of 53 minutes, was it? How did you arrive?
Sorry, just to be clear, sorry, this is said to be an errata. Is there a pre-existing document that's replaced, or is this a new document?
This is the proof of evidence.
Sorry, no, is this a new document, or has this replaced something? Just so I know the line through an earlier document.
I think it's just corrections, it's that.
It's a replacement of the same.
No, sorry, I hadn't.
Replace appendix A, thank you.
The only thing that's changed is the yellow line, which was misdrawn previously.
It just helped me to know I can put a line through appendix A.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so point out the location of the urban extension, which is the yellow block. You can see the DHL sites bounded in blue. I've sort of ringed other population centres, which are sort of scattered around. Access from northern villages, so the likes of Polycop, Eastwood, and then into Gainston, Titfield. Well, perhaps not Titfield, but the others. Would need a continuous shared pathway north of the site, and this is not proposed currently. Access from the Greens northern direction, which is north, west-northwest of the site, requires the same access from the north, or it's a very long way round, having to cross the A43 and then the A5 and the A43 again. Travelling from the Shires, which is bounded in purple, it's the sort of an estate over the road from the AR3.
So is your point here that these other improvements that you're mentioning here would be required, or is your point here that this isn't a suitable location for this development?
I think it's both, actually.
Well, so the second one first, and then
yes,
yeah,
because of distance and sustainability, and it'll come on sort of buffered routes as
yeah,
well.
okay. So that's the basic point. Is you don't think it's a suitable location for this development because there aren't that many houses that nearby, and people would have long walks to get to it.
Correct.
Do you think,
or the provision isn't in place to enable them to have a safe and comfortable journey to do so?
right? Okay, so that yes, so it's not if the appropriate non-motorized use facilities were to be provided, then that would overcome your concerns.
Not fully, because the SU is a heck of a long way away.
Okay, so assuming there's a need for, which we've heard evidence that there is a need for big logistics warehouses, do you envisage that they could be put in locations that are very close to enormous numbers of dwellings, much more so than here?
It is possible, yes. So I believe the allocation for the SUE originally has to be 8 in it.
Sorry,
I believe the
AL1 allocation.
no, sorry, not the AL1 allocation, the SUE planning consent originally had B2 and B8 within it.
Oh, right. Right, a lot. So there's employment in the SUE as well.
It was envisaged at outset. I'm not sure whether that's going to come to pass.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, if we could go then back, please, to the plan we were looking at in the inspector's main concern, which is 8.09, and or if you prefer the master plan. We know in terms of sustainability, one of the big points is that you make is this issue of the pinch point and the you've got 8.09 might be the easiest one to look at, or it might go to the master plan, but both are in a bundle.
Yeah.
I just thought it'd be helpful if we can go, I mean, again, tell the inspector your main concerns in relation to the shared use pathways and in particular pinch points, and then if necessary, illustrate by taking us to a document.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so I've talked about A10. I won't go there again. I think it's quite clear. I will take you please to A23. And what I want to do is I want to move you sort of west to east so you can see kind of what provision there is in place for non-motorised users who might want to get to the site from either direction. So A23, the top half of the page shows the access roundabout, and then pathways, obviously, north and south of that, or left and right as we look. So to the left, we have an existing footpath, typically 2 metres with no safety margin proposed. We then have a proposed multi-use footway, path, cycleway, plus a buffer going into the site on both sides. Actually, it's slightly different on the right-hand side. It's 3 metres rather than 3.5. Nevertheless, we then work along the A5, so we're now on the right-hand side of that site, access roundabout. And what is proposed now on this latest iteration is 2 metres plus 1.5 metre safety margin, total 3.5 metres. Then go to the bottom half of the page. And that's 3.5 metre, so 2 plus 1.5 continues. Until we get to the pinch point just north of the Toad roundabout, and you'll see there's a small box that says 2 metre footway, cycleway, no safety margin. So the width there is currently 1.58 metres. There's a proposal to widen it to 2 metres by going into the highway. But that's it. There's a constraint of a fence and someone else's land. We then go around the corner and there is a toucan crossing will be put in. The crossing will be upgraded across the 6 lanes of carriageway. Then come across the other side and we go into a this is where it gets a little bit tricky because in the fell plantation application, they have committed to put in a 3 metre multi-use pathway. In this version, which will be the responsibility of DHL should they get consent and fell plantation does not come about, then the proposal from DHL and the appellants is 2 metres plus 0.5 metre safety margin, and then continuing down to an island in the road to allow crossing. So that's the picture of what is proposed in terms of multi-use pathway.
And what is the significance, or rather, what do you say? Significance of this and your views about it?
Well, we can look at some of the audit reports that were done to early doors in 2022 into 2023, which raised significant concerns, certainly about the 2 metre stretch. Also on previous iterations of this drawing, so this is P15 in P10, there were issues raised about the ability to actually find 3.5 metres without cutting trees down or having to put in retaining structures, and not quite sure where that's been addressed.
Has it been resolved? Or you don't know?
Don't know.
And so from your point of view, is this a sustainable location for non-motorised users?
I don't
in
think
safety terms?
In safety terms, I don't think so. Not in accordance with guidance, which has been set out and approved.
Okay, and in terms of you we've covered the point on reasonable distances from a sustainable extension. So you mentioned buses.
Yeah.
Now, you deal with this at 9.2.5 of your proof. Can you just, again, setting out what your position is, and then if necessary, taking us to document, can you just explain your position on the bus provision that's proposed?
Okay, so first of all, acknowledge that the appellant has sort of agreed to provide on-site bus stops, not disputed, and to make a £500,000 financial contribution over 5 years. I do note that was noted as being index linked, but in the conditions it's not shown as index linked. And also to augment the number 88 bus into the site, possibly in synchrony with AL3. So the current bus services represent 3 bus services. The X91 goes north-south from Milton Keynes to Silverstone via Toaster, stops in the middle of Toaster, and that would leave us just over a mile walk to the site. It operates from 7:30 in the morning till about 6:30 at night, journey time an hour. The 87 east-west service runs from Northampton to Toaster via the northern villages, stops in the middle of Toaster, leaving you just over a mile walk to the site. It operates from 9:30 to 5:30. The journey time is 1 hour, 7 minutes. And the number 88 east-west service, which is the one that is going to be enhanced from Northampton to Silverstone via Toaster, it's proposed that this will be diverted onto the site. It operates from 7:43 in the morning. Last bus is 18:57, journey time 42 minutes. None of these services operate on a Sunday. So I guess there are 3 points I would like to make. In terms of number 88, frequency is low. The appellant does talk about putting in an hourly service, but it's not stated whether this is a 24/7 hourly service. And therefore the question is, how will this serve shift patterns? Because clearly it would need to, we don't know the answer to that. There's currently no certainty. Notwithstanding that an additional contribution will dictate the level of additional service that's going to be available, it's committed for 5 years only. So this limits the extent to which a sustainable bus service can be guaranteed. What happens after 5 years? The idea is a commercial service, but question mark over sustainability. And the option of a demand-led minibus, which was mooted, seems no longer to be on offer. And then thirdly, there's no service from the SUE at present, and this is the biggest potential employment base one would think for the appellant. So there's limited provision east-west, as I've outlined, and there's no support for north-south travel to the SUE and beyond.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. So then the next the next point to ask you about is the issue of modal shift. You deal with this in section 9.2 of your brief, and you'll remember that the appellant has, rather than seek to deliver a 20% modal shift target, the appellant, Mr. Anderson, have come to their own target of 10%. And I think they say as well that that 10% target was again agreed, or at least not objected to by the council and the National Highways. Can you just give your views on how on that target and on its relationships to the policy and so on?
Yeah. So the local plan part 1, that's at 4001, requires.
Which policy is it?
It is it's policy C2.
It's fine. What page it's on then? Might be page 67, so. Right. No, it's 70 of the electronic version, so.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's hard copy, page 67, but it's electronic copy 70. Part 2 plan are we in, or the course
That's the core strategy.
Oh, that's
So if you look at 6.13 on page 68 of the electronic.
Yeah.
Points.
6.13.
page 70.
No, it's not page. Sorry,
around
Mrs. Gray is going to
68.
the supporting catalog, which is the 68 of the PDF, or 65 internally.
Right, see. C2. Just have a quick. Then achieve the modal shift targets in paragraph 6.13. So we have to go back to paragraph 6.13.
So we're looking at 20% shift from private car trips. And C5 talks about the requirements for SUEs to be connected from first occupation as well. So that's another nuance. And then some other interesting points is that the AL3 consent or application was originally provided for 2% shift from single private car journeys in its final framework travel plan. But in the delegated report, which is, if you want to look at it, it's CD 113.09, amends this upwards to 20%. The AL1 Bell plantation provides for 20% shift, and that's in the officer's report at 113.12. And this, the appellant is providing for 7.8%, so it's not actually getting to 10%, it works out 7.8%. So why contend is that the circular sets out, we have a policy here in the joint core strategy. The circular sets out paragraphs 42 to 44, it expects applications to make, or it expects applications to make a concerted effort.
Sorry, Mrs. Gray, can we just go to that as well?
To the circular.
Yeah,
sure.
Paragraph 42 to 44 of the circular.
Which circular? The
60.03.
60.03 is the DFT circular.
Oh, right,
22.
Oh, yeah.
So these are paragraphs that say at 42 in the first instance, new development should give priority to walking, reading and cycling movements.
Do you have it, sir?
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Mrs. Gray.
And then paragraph 43, the company expects development promoters to enable a reduction in the need to travel by private car and prioritise sustainable transport opportunities ahead of capacity enhancements and new connections on the SRN. And then it talks about travel plans, which obviously underpin motion.
Thank you. So you're, well,
Can I just ask it, so, I mean, what a developer, won't say necessarily this one, but what a developer could do is say, right, well, we're going to follow all this, we're not going to do any improvements to the highway network for road vehicles, but we'll put in, 2 million to bus service improvements, and we'll provide we'll provide connected footways, cycleways to all the villages, blah blah blah. And on that basis, we predict being the important word here, that 40% of people, 50% of people will travel by non-car mode, right? And then that would more than meet your concerns, wouldn't it?
Well, it would on modal shift, yes, it would hit the policy objective.
But that's just that, if we provide these things, people will use them, and we predict it'll be 50%. But
Oh, so you
based on what, it's all very good.
Yeah.
I want to criticise the core strategy, but as it says, we'll have 20% reduction here, and we'll have 40% reduction here.
Yeah.
But you can provide all that you want, but if people would rather sit in a traffic queue in their own car than walk or cycle or get the bus, then what do you do about it?
That's perfectly true, sir. But I think, the national position on sustainability is really quite clear, and has been emerging and landing great bigger in the last couple of years. So it's your judgment as to how aggressive or otherwise the approach should be in terms of setting their objectives, I think.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. And just on the point, I mean, just to be clear on that point, and it's obviously up to the inspector what he to form his view, but your view is that it should be 20%.
My view is that it should be 20%.
Well, it's not should it be 20%. It is what does the development? What would the development need? You could say 20%, 100%, 5%, no percent. It's all just guesses, isn't it? It's what physical measures are required to deliver that sort of figure.
It's more than just a number. I totally agree with you. But also we have, as I outlined, contiguous sites have, passed through or are passing through an application or a consent determination stage, and they're proposing 20%. So why would a contiguous site not have a similar sort of target?
Okay. It's this. What concerns me is the fixation, and I don't mean your fixation necessarily, but the policy members' fixation on a 20% and you're only doing 10%. Well, actually, it's what you're actually doing to get to a figure is far more important. But because this developer or any developer has said, right, well, we're only putting in what we're putting in, but it'll reach 20%. And then the obvious question is, well, how will it reach 20%? That's much more important than what you've said it'll achieve.
I think there's a much bigger question or more important consideration that your question to me raises, which is it vision-led? And is it possible to create a sustainable development out of the application? That's the most fundamental point.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, so on the vision-led question, I mean, you heard last week the council's evidence on vision-led and Ms Baker's contention that this application wasn't vision-led. You will also remember that Ms Baker's view, at least, was that it wasn't done quite how she would have liked, but in the end, on balance, it's addressed by conditions. What's your view on that issue then?
on the conditions?
No, on whether this is vision led, whether it matters and whether it's satisfied by conditions
Okay,
to make it adequate.
Yeah.
Acceptable.
I agree with the position of council as stated last week. I think the NPPF and the DFT circular is quite prescriptive in its requirement for primacy of walking, cycling, horse riding is not so applicable here, but primacy of non-motorised users over motorised users. And in terms of conditions, do you want me to come to that?
Yes, I mean, if you remember, the inspector actually, I think, asked the question. I mean, the point was basically that does this, it may well be that it's not perfect, but actually, where does this point lead, given the provision that's now made in the conditions and possibly in the 106 as well?
Okay, well, we talked about the section 106.
Yes, indeed. So conditions.
So the key condition that's not agreed is number 26.
But going a bit wider than that, I mean, in essence, am I reading what you're saying is that actually you would like it to be, if you don't think this application should be approved at all in principle, but if it were to be, you think there should be a raft of other different conditions requiring other sustainable transport measures?
Ooh,
No, not that far then. I thought you were going to say yes.
So again, please, I'd like to just sort of
So I take your point to be that you don't think on principle that the appeal should be allowed and the application approved. But if it were to be, right, you contend broadly with the conditions that's proposed, and we can talk through a little detail, but you contend broadly, or do you think there should be a raft of other sustainable transport measures that should be required by condition or planning application?
I think what I've been looking at is what are the requirements and rules on sustainability, and does this application hit them? And I've tried to outline areas in which I think it doesn't, and there doesn't. It doesn't.
So the first test in terms of planning, I appreciate you're not a planning expert, but in terms of I can't remember whether it's in the NPPF or wherever it is, the key principle for decision makers in planning applications is if the development isn't acceptable in its form, can it be made acceptable by condition or obligation? And only if it can't, you then refuse. So could this, in terms of what we're supposed to be talking about here, sustainable transport measures, could it be made acceptable by other conditions? The council's happy with the conditions it's proposed, but do you think it should go further?
Well, it's not compliant in terms of shared use, not for non-motorised users. So to answer your question, to fix that, you'd have to do some fairly fundamental re-engineering of the footway and the A5 carriageway to accommodate that. And
this, am I reading that? That would be whether this particular development or any employment development of that site, it would be the same issue, wouldn't it?
If there's a safety concern, then it should be an issue.
Yes.
So it's a matter of balance as to how safe it is.
But what I mean is, if any development for employment of AL1, that same issue would arise, wouldn't it? People are still going to be needing to get into the site.
They're going to be needing to, there are different routes, obviously, and the issue with this one is the A5. It's a trunk road with lots of heavy vehicles and with close proximity.
So are you saying that the site would be potentially acceptably accessed if it were not via pedestrian route, pedestrian to cycle via the A5, if it was coming in at South End?
Well, there's that blue pencil clause that could allow that. The issue then is, how do people from the villages to the north make that a sustainable route to work? Are you then saying that actually we'll put a barrier across and we won't use the A5 at all because it's not safe?
So the bit I'm trying to go back to I'm not actually asking you to come up with the specific conditions at this point, but are you saying that there are more conditions that you think an obligation in relation to sustainable transport modes that should be required for this development to be allowed?
Yes.
Right. Okay, thank you. We won't go into at this point what they are, but I have specifically asked, for say personnel's comment on the condition. So it seems that that's going to come into that then, I presume.
Yes, that's the Monday deadline, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. I just wanted to give you, again, like with as I did with Mr. Wood, an opportunity to comment on the National Highways position statement, given that you've been involved, as Mr. Wood was throughout, with the engagement, if I can do it that way, with National Highways. So maybe we just want to answer the question and then we can go to the statement if you wish. But do you have any comments to make about National Highways, its position in this appeal, your experience with them? I mean, if there's nothing that you...
No, there is. There's a point I wanted to bring up, which is related to conditions. So again, it's that September response to STN, which is at CD 9009.
9009.
Mm-hmm.
9009 is the position statement that we meant.
Oh, sorry, it's position statement, isn't it? Yeah. That is what I meant.
Yeah.
Which is...
Is it in the appendix?
Documents of them. Yeah. And folder 9.
Yeah.
Right.
I've got that.
Yeah,
we've got that. Yeah.
So if you can go to page digital 6.
Proposed amendment for the trigger point.
That's it. So this sort of describes an approach by the appellant to National Highways to change the point at which mitigation work would proceed. So if this appeal is upheld, the predetermination request by the appellant to change the trigger point for providing mitigation from first occupation of the first unit, they'd want to then change it to occupation of reserved matters units.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which National Highways seems in principle to agree with. And it would leave the highway network potentially stranded. It's then a situation that the appellant could dictate the timing, and we've heard lots of lived experience of Tove roundabout and the general network around Tove, Apthorpe roundabouts, and the general A43, A5 road network. The question is, where would this leave residents of Towcester if the mitigation scheme could be sort of kicked down the road?
So just so I'm clear, this is talking about condition 2. Is this still condition 2?
I think it's condition 6 now, so
Right, that's what I was using as a start. And this is one of the same issues that we would, right. I mean, we said we'll discuss this in the roundtable discussions. I think it's going to be best. So I thought this might be something different, which is that point, isn't it? Yeah, we'll deal with that then.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Now, Mrs. Gray, just finally then, are there Any other points that you want to draw to the inspector and inquiry's attention?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
You just wait there.
Mr. Booker.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mrs. Gray. Good afternoon to you. Can you turn, first of all, I've got 4 questions. Can you turn, first of all, to circular 1 of 22, please?
Yes, on that.
Good. And when we get to it, please can you turn to paragraph 19, which you quoted in your evidence?
19.
19. Which is about new connections to the SRM.
Yeah.
Which says, on the basis, the principle, on this basis, the previous paragraph, the principle of creating new connections to the SRM should be identified at the plan making stage in circumstances where an assessment of the potential impacts on the SRM can be considered, alongside whether such new infrastructure is essential for the delivery of strategic growth. And then the bit that you quote about, the company will need to be satisfied that all reasonable options to deliver modal shift have been exhausted before considering options for new connections to the SRM. In this case, we know the answer, don't we? Because policy AL15A has already determined that there should be an access to the A5. Agreed?
I need to remind myself of policy AL1.
The policy that says that the appeal site should be accessed from the A5. At the allocation AL1, you're familiar with that?
I am.
Yeah, which says that the site should be accessed from the A5. So there is no additional requirement to ensure all reasonable other options have been exhausted by non-car modes before satisfying the principle of accessing the SRM, because the policy tells us it should in accordance with the first sentence of paragraph 19 rather, doesn't it? In which case, what's your point?
The point is that this relates to the company, therefore National Highways. The allocation is made by West Northants Council. So presumably, there would need to have been a loop. Has there been a loop?
I genuinely don't understand that answer. The first sentence talks about identifying the principle of creating new connections to the SRM at the plan making stage. It has been. I don't then understand why you're drawing attention to the remainder of the paragraph.
Can I just be clear whether you're talking at odds here? Because I didn't, in terms of vehicular access, I didn't take it that you had an issue with there being vehicular access
Correct.
to the A5.
Correct.
This was for pedestrians and cyclists
Yes.
and horse riding.
It was talking about it being a sustainable
Yeah.
site, getting people there.
Yeah, by a route. Are you suggesting that that means?
No, it's the way it's been referenced and approved is reliance upon this paragraph in support of the proposition that we haven't explored all reasonable options.
Right, okay.
Whereas the all reasonable options is a predeterminant before you get to the question of joining the SRM, which has actually been determined. So in other words, this paragraph is literally irrelevant for the purposes of the inspector's consideration, isn't it?
Well, it depends whether the inspector believes that the decision has foundation, doesn't it? Whether that sustainable assessment has been done.
Yeah, whether the allocation is properly made, essentially.
Okay, so if the allocation is made and then proceeds and isn't sustainable.
Again, I'm not entirely sure of your answer, but I'll move on to my next question. Let's assume that the inspector considers that the appeal should otherwise be allowed. So we're in an appeal allowed world, but he has his pen hovering over the question as to whether STN have identified any other realistically deliverable sustainable measures that the scheme could deliver, but doesn't. And asks himself, has there been identified by STN such measures? Are there any other realistically deliverable sustainable measures that the scheme could deliver, but doesn't?
I think as lay people who
Please don't give me qualifications. Is there anything?
I'm sorry, I think that's not a realistic question to ask of us. That's not our role.
So I'm asking whether you've identified them. I don't mind whether it's your role or not. The inspector will form a view. It's important for me to understand the case of a Rule 6 party as an inquiry, because I've got to ask my witness about it. Is there? I know the point about the the 3 metre, 2 metre points about belt plantation too, and you concur with Mrs. Mate, so I'm not asking about that. Is there any other realistically deliverable sustainable measure that you say on behalf of STM that the scheme could deliver but doesn't?
I can't answer that in the affirmative or the negative because I haven't been through the exercise to assess it. I'm sorry.
So you don't know is the answer.
I don't know.
So the literal answer to my question then is you haven't identified one because you haven't done the exercise.
The exercise hasn't been done, correct.
That's fine. Good, that's helpful. The question was asked about the up-to-date position with regard to national highways and which plan national highways are inviting the inspector to condition. Could you turn to Appendix G, I think it is, and Mr. Anderson's evidence, please. Appendix G. This is cross-reference at page 116 of his main text, notwithstanding that he's on one of the friends that haven't been flagged before. Appendix G.
Oh, I think we can make this a copy. Could you give me the code of this?
Yeah, of course. In a moment.
Probably find it for the information.
I would have thought you'll probably find it quicker than I. 110.3.
Yeah, got it, thanks. Appendix G.
Appendix G.
Somewhere towards the end, because it was the page.
It's literally 4 pages from the end. It's an email from Martin Selden at National Highways, dated the 18th of December 2024.
Oh, yeah.
And as I say, this point is flagged on page 116 of the text.
Yeah.
Where he makes it clear it is revision D, not revision F, that he wants, that he considers should be conditioned. Do you see that?
I do see that, yes.
Good. Had you seen that before now?
I saw it when I read the proof.
Right, so why was there any lack of clarity on your part? You said there's no transparency. I think it's the note I'll take.
Oh, I read the words on the page. I don't understand how they got to them.
Have you asked them?
I haven't asked them because this came up really late in the day.
But you knew it before you said it this morning, presumably.
Yes, and I haven't asked them on that basis. Correct.
Yeah. Thank you very much indeed. Those are my only questions.
Thank you.
Okay, I haven't got any further questions. Mr. Edmund, any examination? No. Thanks. Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Gray, for your contribution to the inquiry. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Gray.
So hopefully we can move on to page Mr. Anderson. Probably so.
Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, should go. Hopefully you can hear me all right.
Yeah, we'll do the sound check. You want to just break into a couple of lines of your favourite song, that'd be great.
I won't sing, but hopefully you hear me.
Trick is keep it within 5 or 6 inches of your mouth. You and Anderson, you are a member of the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation. You have an honours degree in geography and a master's degree in business management. You're an associate transport planner at SAG. You've worked in the field of transport development for the last decade and a bit. Over that period of time, you've worked for both the public and private sector. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
You tell us that you've been involved in this site since October 2020, and you're the lead transport planner. And in terms of modelling, you've produced the CV of the modeller on whose work you've applied, Sarah Jane Gell, at Appendix B. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very much indeed. You produced the main proof and also a series of appendices. Is that right?
Right.
Thank you very much. If you can turn to paragraph 1.3.1. Having told us that you are familiar with the site and that you've had any number of engagements with regards to local highways authority and national highways, could you read 1.3.1, your mandatory declaration, and tell us where you stand by that?
Yeah, the evidence that I prepared and provided for this appeal is true. It's been prepared and it's given in accordance with the relevant guidance of my professional institution, irrespective of whom I am instructed. I can confirm that the opinions expressed are my true and professional opinions, and I stand by that statement.
Thank you. You will have dealt with cases where there's been very little engagement with the local highway authority and or national highways, and other instances where there's been extensive engagement with national highways and the local highway authority. How would you characterise this particular case?
Yeah, it's of all the projects I've worked on, this is the one that's involved the most engagement with the highway authorities and the most time overall, despite it not being the largest development or the one with the greatest traffic impacts. Like I say, the engagement on this project's been extremely high. And I think I set out in my proof the sort of a summary of the hours involved to give a bit of context for how much personal involvement and as a company that we've had on this project.
Thank you. And in terms of the stage of the process, whether by reference to 2 or 3 lanes on the roundabout that were being discussed earlier on, is this the final stage? If permission is granted, the next stage is simply to build the works, the road works, or is there a further stage?
Yeah, it's an important clarification that we're at the planning stage. The layout that's been prepared is a preliminary design, stage 1 design. The purpose of this stage is to determine that the scheme's effective, it does what it needs to do, that it's sound and it's deliverable. It's the principles that we're seeking to agree at this point, and that's what's been done and achieved with national highways. If this appeal is allowed, this is the start of the process. We then continue through detailed design process, section 278, stages 2, 3, 4 road safety audits, before a final scheme is delivered in its final form. So, like I say, this is about the principles for the scheme. It's not about fixing something in stone at this present time.
So if I can just clarify that then in terms of, because the condition, whichever it is, 6, is it? No,
6, yes.
60 says in general accordance with it. Now it's not with general accordance with the plan we were looking at before. It isn't requiring further details to be submitted, which is often the case with planning applications. You know, get approval of further conditions, but for further details of whatever is required. Now that isn't here in this case. Now, is that because this isn't your land? This is whatever work is proposed has to be ultimately agreed by National Highways because it's their land. So they, in the end, can always say, no, that can't go ahead. Is that
exactly right? So all the works proposed within highway land, existing highway land. Majority of it, not all of it, is National Highways land. Part of it is WMC, a small section on Toaster Road. But both highway authorities would need to sign off the works proposed by the appellant before they were carried out.
okay? But if ultimately there was something they said was necessary that wasn't in general accordance with that plan, well then you haven't got planning permission in effect because you haven't, well, you've got planning permission, but you can't implement it because it's not in general, what was proposed isn't in general agreement with it.
Exactly. So yeah, there's a degree of evolution of the proposals over the following stages, and we would need to meet the requirements of National Highways at that time, whatever those requirements are. They can change. You know, the DMRB is a live document; it's continually evolving. If a new volume was introduced, we'd need to hold with that volume at that time, whenever that may be, that we're seeking to agree the works and carry them out.
Thank you. Next question, strategic cumulative scheme. I think I can lead on this because it's agreed. There is no strategic cumulative scheme that's been identified at the second stage of local plan preparation to accommodate the allocations.
Agreed.
Have you seen any strategic cumulative scheme prepared by the local authority or by National Highways that's been presented before the inspector?
Yeah, no other scheme and from no other parties, so not just limited to those two highway authorities, but from Save Toaster now or whoever else. There's no, or any of the developers for the AL sites. There's never been a cumulative strategic highway mitigation scheme put forward in drawing term or just in terms of vague language of it could or should be X, Y, and Z.
Can you turn to your appendix D, please? It's D.
Yeah,
Which should be an email from council to yourself with regards to the possibility of contributing financially.
What page are we on?
It's a very good question, sir. Forgive me. Should find it now.
page 140 of the PDF.
140.
Apologies, sir. I'm working on the hard copy.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can see at the bottom of that page, there's some discussion with regards to the potential for a financial contribution and the extract from the local transport plan. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And then if you turn over the page, we can see capital investment for works to Toaster roundabouts, particularly the tow roundabout, between £1 and £5 million. Is that the extract that was referred to last week?
That's correct, yes.
And the suggestion is, well, can we contribute towards that? It's essentially your email. What do you understand to be the response from the authority back in July?
Yeah, so if I just give a bit of background context before I directly answer that. Okay, so hopefully what you'll see through my evidence and also examination now is that we, from the outset, sought to be a positive or a good applicant. We've tried from the outset and continuously to find solutions to the cumulative issue, to work with the highway authorities to help develop a scheme, promote a scheme, but at every opportunity, every stage that was turned down. And this correspondence that Mr. Tuck has directed to me to is effectively our final reaching out in July 2024. At this point, we've noticed the document referenced by Ms. Baker last week about the emerging local transport plan, and included the extract that you can see on page 141, setting out improvements to address cumulative traffic impacts at tow roundabout specifically. And it sets out a cost estimate of £1 to £5 million. Although we know from examination so far that there isn't a specific scheme that's been developed, but this is just a sort of a high-level item that was included. The applicant noticed that and reached out to the case officer, the planning authority case officer, and said, not for the first time, are you sure, in effect, are you sure you do not want a contribution from ourselves instead of drawing 13D, the one that we looked at previously, so that you can use that contribution to help deliver this scheme. The council, you can see in the email response, set out that it wasn't, quote, an appropriate option, and they gave various reasons for that. So you can see it's clear there and at other stages that the council are rejecting our attempts to help deliver a cumulative or strategic mitigation scheme for tow roundabout.
And the reasons being timescale, the need to mitigate the effects of the development. Then it says the specification of any more comprehensive upgrade is unknown. The cost is also unknown, or how any project will be funded. The more comprehensive scheme is essentially to address the known cumulative problems from 2031 as set out in your modelling. Have things advanced since last July in terms of understanding what a strategic cumulative scheme might be?
As far as I'm aware, there's been no further progress made beyond this point.
Thank you.
I think, yeah.
Sorry. If you can go then to MPPF.
Yeah.
Paragraph 115.
Yes.
Paragraph we looked at earlier on today. In assessing sites that may be allocated for development in plans or beyond that, or specific applications for development, it should be ensured that, D, any significant impacts from the development on the transport network in terms of capacity and congestion or on highway safety can be cost effectively mitigated to an acceptable degree through a vision-led approach. Any significant impacts from the development can be cost effectively mitigated. Just focus upon that. In terms of the measures which are proposed in this case, to what extent has that paragraph been addressed in your judgment or not?
Yeah, so the scheme that the appellant is committed to addresses the significant impact point. It more than addresses it. It provides wider benefit. There's a second aspect, which is cost effectively mitigated. And it's my view that a more cost-effective approach would be for all the developers to contribute a sum of each to contribute a respective sum of money for a single scheme to be implemented. But as such scheme doesn't exist, there doesn't seem much prospect of that materialising. But the option remains with you, sir, in terms of the blue pencil clause about how you'd wish to secure the delivery of highway improvements.
That's the footpath across the front of the residue, is it?
Yeah, not just that. To be clear, the appellant is committed either by planning condition to deliver drawing 13D. Alternatively, the appellant's willing to provide an equivalent financial contribution. And it's our cost estimate that would be circa £2.5 million. So the option is there for you, sir, to determine whether it would be best for the appellant to proceed with the condition and deliver the works in isolation, or to provide that equivalent sum, and for the council to use that in the way that they see fit, whether it's to deliver that same scheme or whether it's to pool it with other potential developer contributions and deliver something different. It could be that they use it to deliver some highway works and also some public transport improvements like you potentially suggested. There's various options for mitigating the impact of this development or also other AL developments.
116 next, of MPPF. Development should only be prevented or refused on highway grants if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety. Is that being alleged by the council?
No.
Or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network following mitigation will be severe. Just pausing there. Is the mitigation that's been referred to in 116 the same as or different from the one that's been required in 115D?
It'd be the same.
Yeah.
In relation to this application, it'd be the same scheme.
And whether that will be severe, taking into account all reasonable future scenarios. We'll come back to that last bit in just a moment. But in terms of residual cumulative impact, in circumstances where there isn't a strategic scheme to contribute to, and an application comes forward which at least mitigates its effect on the network, has a neutral effect on the network in the event that that comes forward, at the point of assessment, whether that be 2025 or 2023, or 2031 rather. What do you say about the appropriateness of such a scheme being consented or not consented?
Yeah, I think it's entirely appropriate that schemes consented. As far as I understand it, the council's argument is that there is a forecast severe impact and thus no development should come forward until that's resolved. But it's important to distinguish that this development, the appeal scheme, does not contribute to that severe impact. To the contrary, it helps mitigate it because it more than washes its own face. In those circumstances, it would be inappropriate for the scheme to be refused on highway grounds.
And that's the exercise we looked at last week when we looked at the A, Bs and Cs.
Exactly, Mr. Secretary. If I may add, the council, in support of their position, brought up reference to the appeal decision. And I just wanted to clearly distinguish between our scheme and theirs because they tried to draw parallels between the two of them.
Sorry, stop that again, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. So in Ms. Baker's evidence last week, in support of the council's position, she sought to draw reference to a previous.
This is the Secretary of State's letter, the Cheltenham.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clearly distinguish the material difference between the scheme we're looking at today and that, which is that scheme didn't propose any highway mitigation unless it was contributing to the severe impact. Now, the contribution was small, but nevertheless, it was contributing to it. I think it was forecast 10% of the severe impact. That such an argument doesn't apply or doesn't work in this case because we're not contributing by 1%, 10% or 99% of the severe impact. To the contrary, our net impact is beneficial. It's a minus contribution.
And just to be clear about that point, just to be clear, because that was agreed with the authority last week, notwithstanding the scepticism sitting behind you, could you take up, please, the rebuttal evidence of Ms. Baker? It's the one with the A, Bs and A, B, Cs and Ds.
Yeah.
Always good to look at the evidence. A is looking at the position in 2031 with the consented developments. Forget about the unconsented allocations. If one drops the development on that scenario and adds the improvements to towed roundabouts arising from the development in relation to the principal directions of travel east and east-west and north-south, what's the position?
Yeah,
better, worse, or neutral?
It's better and considerably better, significantly better, I would argue, and that due planning weight should be afforded to that.
And if we look at scenario B, in an appeal dismissed world, and what then happens is that there's growth from 2021 to 2031, so background growth of traffic, consented developments all come forward in full, and the unconsented allocations come forward at 100%, but with no additional mitigation. So against that background, you then drop on the DHL scheme with the roundabout improvements. Better, worse, or neutral?
Yeah, the same story again, that the residual impact of this development in that context or the one before, hypothetical scenarios, would be significantly beneficial, as demonstrated through the traffic modelling.
And if one then looks at table 4.3, and again, we've got negatives and positives. It's the penultimate column to compare that scenario, isn't it? Scenario D against scenario B. So delay time at seconds per kilometre on how many kilometres are in the model?
I don't have the precise figure, but it's 30 to 40 probably kilometres.
Okay, well, let's check the bottom end of that, 30. So per kilometre, that's an improvement in terms of delay in that scenario by 25 seconds per kilometre times 30. Is that how you do it?
Yes and no. It's difficult to, I don't want to commit to it in that terms, but what I just say more generally is if you look at these network statistics or you break it down by routes or queue lengths at key junctions, whichever way you look at it, the residual impact, the net impact of the proposed development is significantly beneficial.
Well, let's take one of the routes then. So A43 southbound, actually southwest bound, which is route 2, table 4.5. So we'll look at the row 2 row on table 4.5. And I think these are seconds in total for the whole route. Is that right?
That's right.
And I think we have the figure of -286. Inspector rightly points out there's no index on that. Is that seconds, minutes, or hours, or?
Yeah, seconds.
Seconds. So in terms of that route, that's an improvement to 286 seconds. So is that 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes?
The best part of 5 minutes, yeah.
Yeah. So a 5 minutes improvement against that background. In relation to route 4, so southbound on the A5, that's 240, so that's four minutes. So how do you characterise that level of improvements against the background in the event that the other AL sites come forward and are all consented?
Yeah, significance there is how I would characterise it. Significant, substantial, an impact of that magnitude would be clearly distinguishable, clear benefits to all users of the respective part of the highway network. And within that context, I think I set out in my evidence that tow roundabout accommodates circa 50,000 vehicles per day. That's a lot of people and goods every day that would benefit from a significant beneficial impact.
So then let's have a look at what the appropriate comparators are, because the council's case is the last column, and that's comparing D, everything, including DHL, but no mitigation from any other allocations, but they've all been consented, against A, which is just the consented sites and background traffic. So that's the council's case. So let's just think for a moment about that. Let us assume that all the other allocations are consented without any mitigation between now and 2031. Let's assume that, notwithstanding Ms Baker's best efforts, the appeal for part 2 of the Bell Plantation, and indeed any other matters coming forward on AL4 and 5, the council fails to secure those, fails to secure any mitigation from those. What's the position in terms of the appeal scheme being dropped into that situation? Better, worse, or neutral?
Yeah, again, significantly better. It's a consistent theme. It doesn't matter. A lot of the conversation over the past week and a half has been about, is the growth right? Should this aspect of committed development be in or out? There's an underlying fundamental truth, which is you can sort of cut through all those technical arguments that sort of don't really matter. Whichever way you look at it, whatever the forecast is, this mitigation scheme provides more capacity than the proposed development, generates traffic, so there's always a significant net beneficial impact irrespective of the scenario that you seek to examine.
Thank you. Let me just pick up whilst we're here, Mr. Wood's point about COVID. There's a fundamental problem with this because this is starting off from a base which relies upon an October 2021 survey, at which time there wasn't a national lockdown, but of course we're climbing back to normality. What observations do you make about that?
Yeah, there's a lot to say about this point, if you bear with me. First of all, the terminology used by Mr. Wood, he refers consistently to a COVID rebound. That's incorrect terminology. There hasn't been a rebound after COVID. Effectively, prior to COVID, traffic fluctuates every day, but generally you have a linear line of growth occurring.
Is it helpful to look at his figure 1, page 9?
Yeah.
Page 9 of his
Page
proof.
9 of his proof, sir.
Look at that dip in the graph and it takes you back. So
It does indeed.
to days that you can hardly believe happened.
which is why I think we all forgot about Spanish flu.
Yeah, so general point from the graph shows 1994, I think it is, to 2008, 2009, sorry, 2018, 2019. There's generally a linear growth occurring. There are some exceptions to that around, for example, around 2008 financial crash, when you have a major national, international event such as COVID, which changes, significantly changes traffic growth at a national level. And COVID was probably the most extreme example that we've ever experienced of that, in terms of its sudden impact and the magnitude of its impact. We have disruption during COVID, circa 2 years, when there's restrictions on the way people are able to move. But after COVID restrictions are released, July 2021, traffic conditions, traffic patterns don't rebound back to where they were 2019. Instead, a new normal is established, a new baseline is established. That's because two things has happened as a result of COVID. One, there's less car traffic on the highway network because people such as myself no longer work in the office, we work at home. And two, there's more HGV van traffic on the highway network. Similarly, because people like myself no longer drive to Tesco's to do their food shop, we instead do home deliveries, online shopping, that nature. So you've got two ways in which traffic patterns have materially changed. Those two things don't balance each other itself out. There's an overall net reduction in traffic as a result of COVID, as a lasting impact of COVID, of about 5%. So the composition of traffic has changed, but the overall volume is also permanently reduced. As at the end of lockdown.
When you say permanent, we don't know whether it's permanent, do we? But it's stabilised at a reduced level.
Yes, sorry, so I'll come on to that. It's at the initial point, at the end of COVID, there's a permanent effect. But what's since occurred is, from that new normal, not going back to the old normal, we're not rebounded back to the old normal, but from the new normal, traffic growth has started to happen as you normally would expect. And it so happens that as per at 2024, 2025, we've reached the intersection point where the overall level of traffic is now roughly back to where it was in 2020 and 2019. But effectively, there's been 5 lost years of traffic growth that otherwise would have occurred. And that's been offset by the way that people no longer travel, work from home, etc.
Let's just test that on the basis of past history. So if you look at figure 1 again, financial crash occurs in 2008, and we can see there's then a drop off in terms of growth, in terms of vehicle miles, and then a flattening out, and then it grows again from about 2012. Had there simply been continued trend line growth in 2008, the graph would have been what, above or below the line that we actually see?
Exactly, it'll be higher. Effectively, during financial crash, again, there's lost years of traffic growth which would otherwise have occurred.
And so, is your point a similar effect occurs after COVID, or is it a different effect?
No, a similar effect. You've got a permanent lowering of traffic, of overall traffic volumes. But in comparison to a situation where COVID didn't happen, if COVID didn't happen, traffic conditions now would be approximately 5% higher than we know they currently are.
We expect they would have been, or you expect they would have been. We don't know.
Sorry, so of course, yeah. You know, any event could happen, but
yes,
in comparison to that linear forecast, it should be circa 5% higher.
Is that against the notional trend line from 2012 to 2019? Yeah, understood. And help me with this. Is this something that's familiar or unfamiliar in your industry?
Sorry, do you mind expanding on it? So
yeah, is the point that you've made about the effect of there being a hiatus in growth during COVID, and then you restart from a lower level, and therefore it's what would have happened at a later stage? The point you just explained, is that something that's simply a nuance of your assessment, or is that something that's general in your industry?
It's general. The COVID was an extreme example, you know, as we all experienced. But the concept of it isn't different. The key point is that COVID was a significant event in traffic terms. Since COVID, since we prepared our base model, there hasn't yet been another significant event. And thus, the key point is there isn't a need, it wouldn't be proportional for the base model to be updated or to be changed, because we haven't yet, I'm not saying it has to be the magnitude of COVID, but there hasn't yet been an event, either nationally or locally, where traffic volumes have significantly changed beyond what you would expect them to do anyway, because of forecast traffic growth, linear expected traffic growth.
If you turn over the page in Mr. Wood's evidence, 6.1.8, he quotes from the DFT document, which we have in the core documents, essentially saying use a bit of caution when looking at Tempro and NTEM data release notes, where you're using data between 2019 and 2026. See that?
Yeah.
Now, what you have done in the model is taken a date. We looked at ATM, as we looked at this morning, for a 2-week period. We've identified a date that you should be projecting, which is 21st of October 2021. We've done the validation exercise, and then that's then had Tempro growth applied to it. Should one apply an additional degree of caution, look mindful of what's at 6.1.8, or is that talking about something else?
The additional caution isn't required beyond what we've done, in the sense that the survey data we collected was subject to extensive scrutiny after that by National Highways, in the sense that we were required to do various data validation checks to ensure that there hadn't been a sudden rebound or extreme growth since the date of our traffic survey data, that nothing had occurred beyond, again, my linear line of expected traffic growth. And that's the exercises that we were required to do, that we did carry out and were accepted by National Highways.
Thank you. So in terms of the proposition, there's an extra degree of caution to be applied to the figures, and your baseline's wrong. What do you say about that?
That the baseline is correct, it remains accurate, it remains a suitable tool for the determination of this appeal, as confirmed by National Highways, and that appropriate data validation checks, sensitivity, caution was carried out.
Thank you. Now we know, made comments about the 2031 cumulative assessment. We know that National Highways have said we haven't used that, we've used the 2025 opening year assessment. And the point's being made, well, you're not going to have it built and up and running in 2025. Well, what observations do you make about the robustness or otherwise of National Highways use of the 2025 opening year work?
Yeah, so I agree with National Highways that 2025 remains the appropriate opening year. On face value, it may not appear. Obviously, we're in 2025.
You mean what I think you mean is the figures that you've got against 2025 remain appropriate for whatever opening year the development would actually happen.
Exactly. So yeah, and I was going to come on to that. You know, clearly, we've modelled 2025. The scheme isn't going to open in 2025. But if the key point is not to look at it in a simplistic way like that. It is to look at the underlying assumptions that underpin that 2025 assessment and see if those assumptions remain relevant for the updated construction programme for the proposed development. It's my view that it does, and I sought to provide that evidence in my proof to demonstrate that the traffic growth that we forecast for that year has not yet materialised, and that's because the allocated site consented developments have not come forward at the rate that was originally forecast, and the prospect of them coming forward at a faster rate over the intervening years doesn't appear likely or possible.
And then final area that I want to ask you about is sustainable modes of transport other than the private car. We know from the council's position that Ms Baker thinks that the 106 obligation to provide the £250,000 to create the works on the frontage of Bell Plantation residual is needed. You tell us that you take a neutral view in relation to that, and that's a matter that's subject to that. The council are satisfied. We also know that the third parties say that they haven't sought to identify any other realistically deliverable sustainable measures that the scheme could deliver, but doesn't. What's your judgment overall as to whether or not this scheme does as much as should be expected, or does less than should be expected, or does about right?
Yeah, so in summary, I think the scheme does what it reasonably can do, taking into account the location of the site and the constraints. And the MPPF, paragraph 110 and another point, adds that should be taken into account in the decision making, that, you know, opportunities between urban and rural sites will obviously vary. And I think it's paragraph 115 also refers to decision making should take into account the site, the location of the site, its nature, etc. So given the context of this site, the scheme that's been brought forward, I think we've done everything that reasonably can be done on this site from a sustainable transport perspective.
Thank you very much. I would normally say wait there, Mr. Anderson, but just that may be the moment for the mid-afternoon break. Thank you, sir.
Sounds like a good idea. Should we say then until 3:45, or I don't want to put, well, I do want to put a time scale on you, but how do you think in timing in terms of this afternoon?
This has completed his examination, Chief. So my plan is, given where we've got to, and given that the issues have been rehearsed quite fully, my plan was to cut through quite a lot of this.
Sounds very good.
And to get, cut to the chase.
Cut to the chase in terms of the cumulative.
Well, indeed, I mean,
Yeah,
it's where the real disputes are.
Yeah.
So I wasn't planning. It doesn't mean that I accept every single point that's in the
No.
proofs, obviously. But I was going to go to the main issues, and obviously relying on our proofs as being taken as read in several other ways.
Okay, I very much favour that. Okay, so on that basis, we should hopefully get done this afternoon.
I would hope so. I would hope so. Unless Mr. Anderson elongates his answers, we should be fine.
No, I'm in favour.
Rise to it, Mr. Anderson.
I'm in favour of cutting to the chase as well, so I welcome that.
That's fine. Because I think
Did I not say, can we not just cut to the chase on day one? But anyway, fair enough, fair enough. We are where we are. Okay, let's break into 3:45 on that clock. It's a bit like play school through the round window, that clock, and we'll be back then. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, thank you, Mr. Anderson.
make a start, please. Fairly limited number of people around the table said that. Are you waiting for anything in particular or?
Whether we need to wait for Mr. Jones.
Oh, we do, actually, sorry, we do.
Yeah.
We do. Need to go with such a very old business. No, at this rate, that's what we sell. Yeah, I'm not going to sell.
Good afternoon, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Anderson, so following the approach of trying to cut to the chase, I'm going to focus really on two issues. One is the question of the opening year, the 2025-2031 conundrum. And secondly, the question of cumulative impacts and the correct approach to that, bearing in mind your contention, which is accepted, that your proposal on its own has a mitigating those two areas. Starting then with 2025 as your opening year. First of all, leaving aside the question of the footnote at the moment and the interpretation towards all development, it's fair to say that your assessment using 2025 as an opening year had an assumption that not all of the development would be built out. That's correct, isn't it?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. And you had said that in certain cases, you had assumed around 60% would be built out.
That's correct.
Yes. And just taking up your proof of evidence, page 48. Five point two. You hopefully there set out, don't you, the developments that you haven't treated as 100%, and they are land at Silverstone Circuits, development of land at Silverstone Park, and the consented development at Coaster Vale. Yeah? And do you accept that those are substantial developments?
Yes.
Thank you. So to that extent, the reduction to 60% would have an impact if you took into account 100%.
Yeah.
Thank you. The other point on this that I wanted to just check with you is in relation to the approach taken by the council. Now, it was suggested by Mr. Tucker on several occasions that the council, us, had agreed with the opening year assessment being 2025. Do you remember that? And that was put a few times. I just want to put that a little bit in context. So if you could take up, please, core document 80.03. That's in CD 8, hopefully. 03. Sorry, it's not 03. 01. 13. 80.13.
80.03. 01.
No, I don't think that's it.
80.01.
Yeah, 03 is the stupid one.
You're right.
Yeah, okay, and that, yeah.
Hopefully I've got the right one.
80.1.
I don't think it's one. Yes, it is 81. Sorry, I've got one number there. No, that is not the one. Sorry, it's 80.01. It's the first document in CD 8.
Planning response.
It's a planning response from the council. Now this, have you got that, Mr. Anderson? You probably had that beforehand, haven't you? Okay. So this is just picking up the point as to the council's approach to the opening year issue and the 2025 assessment, and the suggestion that they were happy with that. If you can turn to page 6 of that document.
Yes.
And if you look at halfway down, it says notwithstanding. Do you see that, the above?
Yeah.
So this is where the council had been questioning the validity of the applicant's assessments based on lower levels of traffic growth and baseline assessments. That's right, isn't it?
Yes.
And then under that, you have this paragraph where the council is responding to its officer. Notwithstanding the above, National Highways say they have assessed the development in the context of DFT Department Guidance Circular 122, and a key consideration has been how the impacts of the proposal are considered against other allocations, and so on. And then it sets out the circular paragraphs and that footnote 21. And then underneath, you've got the council agreeing with that approach and joint assessment. And then it says the LHA is considering the proposals against the 2031 forecast year, allowing for the full build-out rate of the sites and already committed developments, including Toaster, and a consistent NSPM forecast year date. And then it says the 2031 forecast year also ensures consistency with the forecast years used by other AL sites in the planning system. And the next paragraph, again, recording what National Highways have said. They confirm the applicant has produced an opening year as required by para 50 and so on, and they refer to the 2025 future year. So they're reporting that. And then they have the various paragraphs, but then if you see underneath the tables after that rehearsal, the LHA, the Local Highway Authority, is concerned that these highlighted developments are only assumed to be 60% built out in the 2025 scenario on which NH based their recommendation. While it's accepted that this is a decision for NH, the LHA considers it has a duty to revise the LPA, but in its opinion, the implications for the AL development subject to this planning application are likely to be underestimated. NH accept in the final paragraph of the response potential for future cumulative impacts of the totality of the AL sites at the end of the plan period have a severe cumulative impact, which would adversely affect the operation of the tow roundabout. And then it goes on to make comments about that. But the upshot of this is that the council was not entirely happy, were they, about the 2025 assessments. They had flagged up here their concerns about only estimating or assuming that 60% of the developments would be delivered.
Yeah, at this point, they had, this is June 2024,
Yeah.
notwithstanding that the same time the previous year, between June to September 2023, the council themselves had told us to model 2025 opening year and to model these developments at 60%. So in effect, the council instructed us to do something, we went away, did it, and then they decided, actually, we don't like that. We like it done in a different way,
Yeah.
despite the fact that policy dictates that it should be done the way that we did it.
Yeah, yeah. So, but I think just to distill that down, I think you are agreeing with me. Originally, you say the council told you to use 2025. You consider that to be the correct policy approach. But certainly by the time that this response came your way, the council were doubtful that it was the proper approach. That's fair, isn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. And that's the last word that you had from the council on this particular issue, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, in terms of the position in 2031, that assessment that you've done does take into account, doesn't it, the full build out of all the development?
Correct.
Yeah. And 2031, just again looking at it from a sort of a logical perspective, is a good proxy, isn't it, for the period that you say the scheme would come on, your scheme would come on a track, which would be 2029.
I disagree with that, sir. On face value, it may do. You know, 2031 is close to 2029, but again, going back to my earlier point, it's about looking at the underlying assumptions, and the underlying assumptions in our 2031 assessment will not take place, in my view, with the evidence that I provided. They will not materialise by 2027 or 2029. Whatever you want to choose as the appropriate opening year.
Right. And that's based on your interpretation of footnote 21, isn't it, of the circular?
Yes, in part, yes.
Yes. So there's a dispute between us, obviously, as to how that should be interpreted. Assuming that Mrs. Baker is correct, that you're supposed to take into account all development, if she's right, and the inspector will decide that, if she's right, then do you agree that 2031 would be a good proxy?
I think what I'd say to that is, if Miss Baker's right, where do you stop? You know, what's the limit to the development that should be included? You know, there has to be the point of the circular, the assessment that it's setting is to provide you a clear point for the assessment and a clear amount of development to be included within it. That it's the amount of development at that time, and then linking to the MPPF reasonable scenarios, quote, realistic. So there's an underlying assumption that any forecasting work we do needs to be grounded in realistic assumptions. There's no point testing or basing judgments on scenarios that could not ever materialize.
Yes, I mean that's a slightly different point. I mean, you're taking that to an extreme, because there isn't really that much difference between you and Mrs. Baker on this point. You believe that you look at the scenario as you imagine it to be in 2025, which was, you thought, 60%. What she does is she looks at paragraph 49 of the circular, and she looks at the part which says a transport assessment for consideration by the company must also consider existing and forecast levels of traffic on the SRN, alongside any additional trips from committed developments. And she then looks at what those committed developments are. They're not open-ended. There's a list of committed developments. But she treats them as all built out. That's the difference, isn't it, between you?
It is, but I would make a wider point, which is that if I was to redo the opening assessment now, it would have less traffic in it than I originally did and presented in my evidence. For example, I wouldn't include 100% build out for all the other AL sites at the point of opening for this scheme, because you look at AL3, which was ahead of us and probably should have been partially occupied by now, but it's not. It still doesn't even have a reserve matters
Yeah,
approval. So there's a clear track record of slow rate of delivery across consented developments and AL allocation sites. Likewise, AL2 was submitted a year ahead of us at the point that I carried out the 2025 assessment. I thought that they would have a consent ahead of us, and they, there'd be a greater chance of them being built out at the same time that we did. As of February 2025, we know that they still have not been determined,
yeah.
despite being in the system for 5 years.
Yes, but again, Mr. Anderson, that's applying your interpretation, isn't it? I was trying to shift you from that and just for the moment accept this Baker's interpretation, which I know is not yours, and the inspector knows as well. If you look at footnote 21, you've got that to hand.
Yes.
And it says where development proposals are consistent with an up-to-date plan or strategy, where there is no up-to-date plan strategy, this should include all relevant development that's consented or allocated, where there's a reasonable degree of certainty, will proceed within the next 3 years and include the full amount of development to be built. So, leaving aside what's actually happened with AL1, at this moment in time, you would consider there to be a reasonable degree of certainty, wouldn't you, that these sites would come forward?
Yes.
Yeah. So you wouldn't take those sites out now based on Mrs. Baker's approach either, would you? They would remain in if you were doing her approach.
Yes, but I may potentially consider to include them in part rather than in full. But if I was to do such a thing, I would seek to agree with both the LPA and the National Highways.
Yes. But her case is that you should not be looking at them in part. That's her interpretation. You should look at them in full. That's her case.
Yes.
So that's why I put it this way. I know what you say, and I know you don't agree with that. But if Mrs. Baker's approach and interpretation, footnote 21, happened to be right, or the inspector thought it happened to be right, and you don't break it down in part, in that case, the 2031 assessment would be a good proxy.
Yes.
Thank you. Now, I want to just also ask you then about National Highways position in all of this. National Highways, although you were asked to look at the residual cumulative effect in 2031, National Highways themselves didn't take the outcome of that assessment into account, did they?
That's right. They confirmed that they shouldn't take it into account in their decision making or their recommendation for this application.
Yes, and we see that, don't we, I mean, in several places, but the easiest is to go to your proof, page 93. We get to paragraph 6.4, 2031 future year. Yeah. And here we see, don't we, that this is what happened was National Highways had the future years cumulative impact assessment that you had done for 2031. But they decided not to take account of that because they felt that they were precluded from doing that by reason of Circular 0122, and that's set out, isn't it? And you refer to it in a letter that they sent on the 5th of July 2024, CD 2311, if one wants to look at it, and it says there. This is their view. We asked the developer to undertake a future year cumulative assessment in response to concerns being raised by sectors to now. However, on reflection, the outcome of this 2031 cumulative assessment could not be considered as part of our decision making due to the policy requirements set out in section 50 of the DFT circular, as this requires an opening year assessment only. So in this case, you can see that National Highways took quite a blinkered approach, didn't they? We decided we're not even going to have to take account of the 2031 assessment because we don't think we're allowed to in accordance with the circular.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe it as blinkered. I'd say that they are correctly applying the policy that they are required to apply.
Okay, well that's, I mean, a strange approach, because when you look at what they did find in relation to this assessment that you did, we can find this in their response, hopefully. This will be in other appeal document, perhaps it's 8011.
National Highways.
National Highways letter. Indeed. I think it's 8011, I'm hoping. Yes, I mean, there are several of them, but this is the latest one. And if you go to, just to read through the thing, but if you look at page 4 of the electronic copy, there's a paragraph that starts, National Highways has assessed this development in the context of the circular.
Yes.
Yeah. And considers the impacts and so on. And then if you look at the third paragraph after that, or the second one after that, it says, we can confirm, that one,
yeah.
we can confirm that the applicant has considered the opening year assessment as required in paragraph 50 of the DFT circular, whilst the minor inaccuracies and so on, they're happy with that. Then they say this, we note that there is a potential for future cumulative impacts of totality on AL allocated sites at the end of the local plan period to have a severe cumulative impact, which would adversely affect the operation of the Cherry roundabout. National Highways recognises that the mitigation proposed by the applicant would be effective in mitigating the impact of this proposal. However, it's unlikely to accommodate the impact of other AL allocated sites in their entirety. We would concur with the council it would be preferable to have a strategic mitigation to support all the AL sites, and consider that in order to progress this approach, it's necessary to ensure a jointly agreed approach between our authorities as a documentary policy, and they welcome further working. So what we find here is that National Highways were concerned, having seen your 2031 cumulative assessment, that there was the potential for there to be severe cumulative impacts that would affect the operation of the Cherry roundabout at that time.
Yes.
But because they thought that they couldn't take account of that because of Circular 1 of 22, they decided not to consider it in their response.
I'll go back to what I said, that they, in my view, correctly applied the policy that they are required to apply as directed by the Secretary of State.
Yes. Well,
and the policy is very clear that it says about the open year assessment, paragraph 50, and it describes it as shall, so it's a requirement for them to apply that particular test.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting at is, I know that's obviously what they believe because they wrote that in the letter. But what I'm putting to you, Mr. Anderson, which I think is quite straightforward, is that whatever they thought they were hamstrung by that policy, they thought they can't look left or right outside of that opening year assessment that they've gone for. But what they did find is that what they didn't find was that there would not be a problem in the 2031 scenario. On the contrary, they found that there were likely to be severe cumulative impacts.
Yeah, so I accept that they note that there's potential, emphasize potential for a severe impact.
Yeah.
You use the word hamstrung. I would suggest that what this paragraph is saying is that the National Highways believe that they are hamstrung because of the position of the council and the council's failure through policy to adopt their failure to do the necessary work through policy for National Highways to deliver or secure contributions towards a cumulative mitigation scheme.
Well, without going into blaming at the moment, because we can get into that too, but the reason that they didn't consider the outcome of that assessment that you did, I don't think they do talk about the council's failure in any way. They give a very clear reason, is because of the requirements of Circular 22, we're only allowed to look at the opening year assessment. That's why they gave that response, isn't it?
In part, but also Mr. Tucker referenced the relevant paragraphs. They can only look at strategic mitigation, cumulative mitigation, if the council have done the necessary legwork at the plan making stage.
Yeah.
Paragraphs 26, 29, and 52, something along those lines. It repeatedly emphasizes that if National Highways are able to do something about cumulative strategic mitigation, the council firstly needs to do something through policy to enable them to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a slightly different point you're making, Mr. Anderson, and you're right, we'll come to that as well, as to what can be done, if anything, about this whole mess. But what I just want to sort of isolate for the moment is that insofar as one might be telling the inspector that while National Highways are very happy with the situation, National Highways have said they are not objecting to this scheme. They put that in a letter. But it's important also for the inspector to appreciate, isn't it, that they did recognise the potential for a severe cumulative impact in 2031, but did not consider it as part of their decision making because they thought they couldn't because of the requirements of Circular 22. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Now, just looking at whether that is in fact correct, I mean, whether they are not able to look at these cumulative impacts because of Circular 22. I mean, is that advice, did they discuss that with you? Did you have correspondence with National Highways where you said you can't look at anything except the opening year, or is that just from them?
No, not at all. We haven't directed any party in terms of how to make their decision making
Sure.
respective to this application.
Yeah, so there wasn't any consultation in that context with you?
Not directly, you know, obviously in my evidence and the underpinning transport work that we did, I emphasised how I believe policy should be applied and the appropriate test, but there was never any correspondence or a meeting from ourselves between National Highways or anybody else where I said,
Yeah.
you shouldn't be looking at 2031, you need to only be looking at 2025, something of that nature.
Okay, thank you. No, I was just curious to know if you'd had any input there. All right. Now we need to just get to this issue of the residual cumulative impact and whether the inspector should be taking that into account or whether he can be content that he doesn't need to worry about it because your proposal on its own will wash its own face. So I'm moving on to that topic. Now, in that, please, we need to look at your page 93 first. About reference, it is yes, so it's page 80. And we've got quite a neat summary that you put together here about the modelling results that you present. And I think it's just useful to see the way you put it. In the first instance, you say at 5.7.1 that the future performance of the model network is predicted to worsen as a result of the consented developments and the other AL allocation sites, as well as general background traffic growth. And that's your, you put an explanation there, and that's despite the opening of the leaf road.
Yes.
You then, at 2, said there's going to be a significant betterment, net betterment, to the performance of the model network in all future years scenarios. And that's because of the capacity benefits of the mitigation scheme.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you say at 3, the performance of the model network is predicted to significantly deteriorate at the 2031 future year as a result of adding the other AL sites. And that is because that's including even with your mitigation.
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you. And then you make the point that, however, isn't caused on its own by your development.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
On its own or indirectly,
Yeah.
to an extent.
That's because your development results in, you would say, net beneficial impacts because of your scheme, your mitigation scheme.
Yeah.
But what we can agree is that at 3, that regardless of the mitigation scheme, once you have all the other AL allocation sites, there will be a significant deterioration in 2031.
Agreed.
Thank you. And that's
If
the
there's no further
mitigation.
mitigation, if there's no further mitigation.
Yes, exactly. There's no further mitigation. And that's at the moment the impact that the council is concerned about. That's right, isn't it? That's your understanding.
Yes, it seems to be that the council is concerned about the impacts of other applications, not the one that we are supposed to be determining,
Yeah.
supposed to be considering now.
Yeah. I mean, the council is concerned, to be fair, with the cumulative impact, isn't it? Of all of the developments, all the AL developments, including yours.
Yeah, yes, but it doesn't seem to be given due consideration to the net beneficial impact of this development. So, like I said multiple times, this development does not contribute to that severe impact. It's a separate issue which should be considered separately from this scheme, in my view.
Yeah, in your view, but that's the difference between us, isn't it? We say that you have to look at it all together. That's the key difference between us. We're not disputing that your scheme on its own gives rise to mitigation. So if I just put it in this way, so it's a core observation in your proof, isn't it? That assuming that no other development brings forward strategic road network mitigation, adding your proposal to any scenario will always lead to some reduction in congestion because it offers mitigation by expanding the tow roundabout.
Yes.
That's your case, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's why when you look at your table on page 79, the do something cumulative is significantly worse than the 2021 base. It's nonetheless better than it would be if there hadn't been the mitigation in your proposal. That's why that shows in that way.
Yes.
But on that approach towards identifying residual cumulative impacts, a council could never take issue with a proposal's cumulative impacts as long as its net individual effect was to reduce waiting times and congestion, even if the cumulative effects that we discuss overall were extremely bad.
I see no reason why the council or any council would have issue for any scheme that delivered a net beneficial impact, irrespective of potential wider cumulative situation. And I can't think of any scheme that's ever been refused on those highway grounds.
Well, thinking about it generally in terms of cumulative impacts, if cumulative impacts is to mean anything, Mr. Anderson, that's where I'm sort of getting at. And as I say, I hope I've made it clear that I understand your point about your development and its net benefit. But if cumulative impacts or residual cumulative impacts means anything, it's the impact that arises from multiple different individual contributors acting together. That's what it is, isn't it?
Yes. I think if you don't mind, if I just add to that.
Yeah.
I understand the argument about cumulative impact. I don't disagree with that. I think you're just applying it to the wrong application, the wrong development. The argument that you're seeking to run is legitimate for all the other AL developments as they currently stand, because they're not committed to delivering any highway capacity mitigation measures. The issue I have is that you're trying to apply it to us when we are, and we're delivering a net beneficial impact, and that doesn't stack up.
Yeah. Well, you are delivering a net beneficial impact, but when you're considering impacts together, which is what cumulative means, then you accept yourself that there will be a significant deterioration, don't you?
But not as a result of this development.
Well, it's a result of this development acting together with the others.
No, to the contrary, this development is helping to mitigate, not fully, but to an extent, those other developments. It's making a net beneficial, positive contribution to dealing with the cumulative issue from the other developments.
All right. Well, regardless of the wording we use at the moment, there is a deterioration, isn't there, in the situation in 2031 cumulatively with all the developments together.
Yes, I don't think there's a dispute between.
Right.
If there's no other mitigation.
Yes, if there's, well, there's no other mitigation at the moment.
No, but there's no other scheme at the moment, is there? There's no other
Yes,
position at the
yes,
moment.
yes, fair point. So we can keep that in our minds, the inspector's additional words, if there's no other mitigation. But if there is no other mitigation, there will be a significant deterioration when all of the schemes are acting together in 2031.
Yeah, that's what the modelling shows, but what I tried to say in my evidence is that effectively we've provided the council with the evidence base to secure mitigation from those other developments. The council could and should be seeking mitigation from those developments, and the council so far has not done that.
Yes, and you make that point, don't you, in your proof about the schemes that you were putting forward. So if we just turn to those for the moment. You said that you gave evidence in chief as well, that you had put forward various schemes to the council, and you were taken in evidence in chief to an email where you had a response back from Mr. Chalice saying that your suggestions were not acceptable to the council. Appendix D, yes. But we don't need to turn it up, we've just been to it. But it's fair to say that the fact that you weren't so concerned about these cumulative impacts, and you mentioned that quite clearly in your proof as well, that you're concerned about them, demonstrates that you appreciate that there is a serious issue that needs to be addressed, doesn't it?
I agree that, yeah, there is as a result of the other developments, and what I sought to do from the outset of our application was to highlight that concern to the council and to recommend to them to get their act in gear and to do some work and to develop a cumulative mitigation scheme, because it would be preferable, but not necessary, preferable for such a mitigation scheme to be brought forward, to be worked up. That would be the best solution for everybody, each of the respective developers, also for locals. The council did not do that work, leaving us, DHL, the developer, with no alternative option but to bring forward an individual mitigation scheme, which goes further than is necessary in planning terms, in terms of the improvements that it will deliver.
Yes, and I think that's the heart of it really, for the council, is that there needs to be a method of addressing these severe cumulative impacts through a mitigation scheme. And I think you very fairly in your proof and in your evidence in chief, particularly in your section 7 onwards. So if you just look at your paragraph 7.6 onwards.
Yeah.
And you're addressing the point there. And you do say in your proof, and you're telling the inspector here, that there are going to be these capacity issues at Toad Roundabout. You as an expert, the transport planner, recognise that. And you are advising the council and National Highways. 7.62 is very telling. You say it should be noted that the appellant, you, has been raising substantive concerns to WNC and National Highways about the future performance since early 2021. And you even sent a cumulative site approach note, 2021. You wanted the site allocations to be assessed on a cumulative basis. Your note said, it's clear that capacity enhancement measures are likely to be required to accommodate the adopted local plan proposals, particularly at Toad Roundabout. And then you made the point that your development represents less than 1/3, 31%. But 31% is quite high in the context of it being only one of the 5 sites, isn't it? So it's a substantial amount of traffic generation. And then you continue to say that you carried on to try and kickstart a cumulative mitigation scheme. You modelled them and you highlighted the pinch points. And you said that there was a need for intervention, 7.66, to avoid significant levels of forecast congestion in the 2031 future year. So it's clear that you, as an expert, fully recognise the seriousness of the situation, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I'm continuing to emphasise today. The background context for this, you referenced that note, so 2021, 4 years ago, I'm effectively saying to the Council on National Highways, get your head out the sand. You've got a problem here. You've done nothing about it. Wake up and start to take action.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry.
let me put it this way. So I can't do anything about the strategic scheme. All I can do is either grant permission for this development or refuse permission for this development. A question for you, Mr. Anderson. If and the assumptions on this cumulative impact is that no other mitigation comes forward on any of the other schemes, isn't it? That is the assumption
Yes.
here. So if I refuse planning permission for this scheme and the developer just decides, right, forget it, we're giving up on this site, we'll sell it to somebody else, no more, and this allocation, this part of allocation AL1 doesn't come forward at all ever. But all the other AL sites come forward as the council is concerned about with no mitigation. What is the situation at Cove Roundabout? Is it better or worse than it would be now?
Than it would be now in 2025.
Well, than it is now. Well, or it would be in 2031, or put it in 2031, would it be better or worse than it would be in 2031 otherwise?
Yeah, of course it'd be worse, and that's demonstrated through the modelling we've done. So there's two 2031 do minimum scenarios. You've got a do minimum scenario without the AL sites and do minimum scenario with the AL sites. So neither of those scenarios includes our scheme. So we've given up and gone away DHL. And it shows that the conditions are significantly worse in the do minimum cumulative scenario. It's titled, horrible title, but it's significantly worse in that scenario than it is in the equivalent scenario where the AL developments don't come forward without mitigation.
So taking that to another similar outcome potential scenario, if you were refused permission because the cumulative residual impact in 2031 would be severe, together with the other AL sites, because there's not sufficient mitigation. It's fair to assume also that the same reasoning would apply to the other AL sites as well. They would also be contributing to that severe impact. So there could be a scenario where none of them come forward.
Potentially, depending on the judgment of the decision maker, each of those respective developments.
Exactly. And the solution to that, as you've identified, I think very fairly in your proof and in other documentation, is the necessary mitigation for all of these sites looked at together.
Agreed.
Now, in the absence of that happening, so in the absence of, so your scheme, if it's permitted, without a strategic solution for the Cove Roundabout, if your scheme is permitted, you have the net, you create a net benefit by your expansion of the Cove Roundabout. Then the question is, what happens to the other AL schemes that come forward? And the suggestion was that, well, I think one of your suggestions as well is that you could have a sort of a pooled contribution to make sure that every AL scheme washed its face. That was your point. But you heard Mrs. Baker in her evidence yesterday or last week, where she said, well, that doesn't work because every scheme or the smaller schemes on their own, taking the approach that you take, will not give rise to a severe harm or severe impact, and therefore there's no policy hook to require them to mitigate. And we see that borne out, don't we, in the National Highways response that I put in this morning, which I don't know if you've got a copy of there.
Yeah, now I'm familiar with what it
You're
says.
familiar with what it said.
Yeah.
I mean, in essence, National Highways Have you got that? That would be.
Yeah, I remember it from this morning.
National Highways have looked at the remainder of the Bell Plantation site. And notwithstanding their concerns about 2031, they have given this application a clean bill of health, haven't they? It's on the second page, and they said they have assessed the impacts of the development in isolation, indicates minimal increases in queues and delays on the SRN in the opening year. As such, we consider the development is not expected to have a severe impact on the operation of the SRN. And they've looked at the 2024 opening year scenario there. Therefore, no mitigations are required for the SRN in the area to support the development in the. So there isn't really an answer through that route. The only answer really is to not grant permission for any of these schemes until there's a strategic solution, in order to avoid that very real harm that you have identified in 2031.
No, I fundamentally disagree with that. It's important to, first of all, I disagree with what National Highways have said, and I think that they should be seeking mitigation from that developer.
Right.
But the key point is that National Highways isn't the decision maker. They're providing a recommendation, and in that case, that application has been refused. Partially on one of the reasons for refusal is highways. And in 4 months' time, the council would have a strong argument at that appeal. If you sat there running the cumulative mitigation scheme argument, it's only adding a little bit, but it's contributing to a forecast severe impact. That, I believe, is a sound argument, and the inspector at that time, I think, would give due weight and consideration to that argument to ensure that either the development's refused or that suitable mitigation is secured from it.
And what about the argument that Ms. Baker made last week, which was, okay, well, that's fine in principle, but if this development, this other part of AL1 that we're talking about here, only has a relatively small impact, but actually the only actually you can't widen half a lane, or you can't, you know, there's a minimum amount of stuff that you can do. What about if that the minimum amount of stuff that you can do is excessively expensive for that development?
Yeah, so I completely understand that that line of questioning, and I don't think that such a situation would arise in relation to that development, the Bell Plantation development, and if I can demonstrate that, if that would be helpful.
Yeah.
So if we go to the plans bundle and the two drawings that
So this is the cumulative and the
Ms. Gray directed us to this morning.
26, 29 and 26.
Trying the notion that the sun only shines to the righteous, which might have full of light.
Yeah, you can work out which one it is.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure it's this one. Well, here we are.
Shining right in your eye now.
I think it's just low enough, but that'll be better once it's Okay, so the conversation this morning was slightly helpful or relevant to this. So effectively, we're flicking between the two drawings, and if you, notwithstanding the stuff which is shown in, which is effectively the site access works for ourselves and the other AL developments. So they'll be delivered under a separate package. They aren't mitigation works, they're site access works. But the reason they're showing is we're showing that the mitigation scheme fits or it works with the access arrangements for ourselves and the other developments. So if you can put aside the stuff in pink,
The labels in pink, not the
labels and lines in pink. Any
I suppose, yeah, I see what you mean. Distinguishing between red and pink here, but, yeah, okay.
Yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the only difference between the two schemes is localized, and it's on the A5 northern arm of the Tove roundabout. And in short, it is a little bit more widening of the western side of the carriageway at its northern end. And it is changes to the road markings on that A5 northern arm in order to demarc a longer two-lane entry approach, southbound approach to the Tove roundabout.
Right, yeah.
So the extent of the works is limited, but it will provide a meaningful benefit. And you may be asking, oh, why don't we just do that?
Yeah, that was my next question.
Yeah, well, these works, these latter works, cannot be delivered until the Bell Plantation development implements its site access proposals.
Right.
Those site access proposals are to close their existing access to the garden centre and move it further north.
Right.
And that allows, because that right turn lane into the existing garden centre is removed, well, it's moved further north out of the way, it allows an extended two-lane section southbound to the Tove roundabout. So these are works that can be delivered, and following the evidence of Miss Baker last week, we sought to get a cost estimate for the difference between these two schemes, ignoring the stuff in pink, and we believe that it would be less than £150,000 worth of highways works to deliver the additional stuff highlighted. I would suggest that for a scheme of that nature and size, £150,000 would not be an unreasonable amount of money, or certainly wouldn't jeopardise its viability.
Okay, thank you. And just to be clear, the 26, which is cumulative, right? That was the you, so your colleagues had prepared in response to general queries about what cumulative works might be achievable. Yeah. And does this takes account, this isn't just the other bit of AL1, is it? This is AL2 and AL3.
Yeah, so the context for this is not us being asked, but us leading the way,
Right, okay.
trying to say, look, this is the sort of thing that you could do. Here's an example of it. What we've done is limited in nature. By that, I mean that we haven't sought to use third-party land. All the works are constrained to the existing highway boundary. You could do more than this, because the land to the northeast and the northwest of Tove roundabout forms part of the AL1 Bell Plantation site and the AL2 site. But for the purpose of this exercise, we didn't seek to stray into land outside of our control or highway, the boundary of the highway network.
But is what conclusion have you reached in respect of this plan then, in terms of, do you think that if this was in A26 was implemented by whoever or by cumulative various developers, do you think this deals with all of A1, all AL1, all of AL2 and all of AL3?
Yeah, so to be clear, so we did internal modelling as part of this. We didn't formally submit it because the council showed no appetite even to look at it or to give any due consideration to it. But in that direct answer to your question, this scheme would deliver a net beneficial impact, no detriment, at least of all of AL1. Alternatively, it would deliver a mitigation scheme for all the AL developments, but it would not be, it would be less than, sorry, let me phrase this. It wouldn't be a nil detriment mitigation scheme. It would be, if I could phrase it, a non-severe mitigation scheme. So it would be a mitigation scheme where you bring down the impacts from severe. They'd still be adverse, but they would be minor to moderate adverse. They wouldn't be as severe as they're currently forecast without any mitigation.
Right, okay. And you think that would cost about 150,000 on top of what the work you're doing, but DHL can't do it because it relies on that other part of AL on the access being moved.
Exactly. So the first bit, the main bit, we've costed it £2.5 million, which is what DHL is willing to either deliver or contribute on, is the limit to what we're able to do without third-party land. The additional benefits, the additional works could readily be delivered following the implementation of the Bell Plantation access proposals, and the cost of those works are actually fairly limited. It's only £150,000, which in the context of that application, I don't think is a significant amount of money. And certainly in relation to the £2.5 million from DHL, it isn't. And to provide some context, the Bell Plantation development generates 50% of the traffic of the DHL development. So 50% of the traffic, but the money required, the contribution required would be about 5% of the £2.5 million. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Anderson, you haven't, or at least we haven't seen, this inquiry doesn't have any modelling, does it, to say that your scheme would work, that this proposal would work?
Yeah, that's right. I just acknowledge that there, that we internally done it. I admit it was never formally submitted.
No, and yeah, that's fine. And I just wanted to check that. So we don't have any evidence that this would work or result in a less than severe impact.
I accept you don't have the modelling results in front of you, but I would say two things: that the net benefit of the first scheme is significant. So there's residual capacity there, and the impact of these works, just on a first principles or logic sense, would be substantial. So if you get a chance to view, if you haven't already done the modelling videos, that it shows a long queue on the A5 southbound approach, and that queue would undoubtedly be materially benefited by the delivery of a substantially extended two-lane approach to the tow roundabout. I think it's clear that it would have significant beneficial impact.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
No.
You weren't that.
No,
About to say something?
No, just breathing. I think. Please, no, I'm still breathing.
In that case, so Mr. Anderson, now insofar as that proposal is concerned, we go back though, don't we, to this other issue, which is how such work could be secured. Now, I hear what you're saying, that, oh, well, you think that another inspector would be very persuaded by this idea, despite National Highways' position on it, and despite there being no real policy hook for that. In reality, bearing in mind that you accept, I think, as very fairly, that there will be the severe cumulative impact arising from all the schemes together, what you're really asking this inspector to do is to crudely kick the can down the road, aren't you? And hope that things will be all right in the future. Meanwhile, the local community here will be the parties who suffer.
No, I don't accept that at all. I think what we are asking or hoping happens at this inquiry is that a precedent is set whereby each development comes forward and it washes its own face, if not more, as we are doing. If this appeal is allowed with that type of approach, I think it would set a very clear precedent for other schemes as they come forward to an inquiry in June and so on for the other developments, that is the position that should be applied, and that there's significant weight would be given to the judgment of the inspector in this case, in its application to the other AR developments.
But how would you, or how would this inspector, or how do you suggest this requirement would be imposed on the future schemes when the national policy only requires mitigation where there is a severe impact. It doesn't require nil detriment, does it? It doesn't. Where does it say that you have to wash your face? It doesn't.
Yeah, we seem to be counter arguing your own position, but this appeal helpfully provides the council with the evidence base, i.e. my modelling. We've got traffic conditions in 2031 without mitigation, which are forecast to be significant, if not severe. So you've got the evidence base there. And you've also, you say you don't have the policy hook, but you do have the policy hook in paragraph 116, it is now, residual cumulative impact, which is what you've been seeking to argue in relation to this appeal, that you shouldn't simply be looking at each development in isolation saying, oh, our impact is adverse, but it's only a little bit adverse.
Well, that's precisely the point, though, Mr. Anderson. That's precisely the point.
But that doesn't apply to us.
But that's your case. That's all correct, but it doesn't apply to us. Of course, it applies to you. You're part and parcel of that cumulative problem. Well, that's what you.
We keep on going round and round on this. I understand.
Yes. Thank you, sir. But just to wrap up on that point, I mean, this is exactly the point that you say you're not part of the problem. So will AL1 extra, so will AL2 and so on. The real point here is that residual cumulative impacts have been identified for 2031. And at least insofar as the framework is concerned, there is a necessity to take those into account. And the framework suggests that permission should be refused on such grounds, doesn't it?
Not in relation to the circumstances of this
Right.
appeal. Hopefully I've been clear on that and my reason for why I think you have a sound case in relation to the other applications, but our application is materially different because we're doing the one thing that they are not, which is to offer mitigation.
Yes.
If the other developments can either change their position, bring forward mitigation, hopefully they would be approved in line with the precedent set here, hopefully. Alternatively, they can continue with their current position, in which case you, the council, will have very strong grounds, in my view, professional view, to refuse their application and to successfully defend that appeal if it came to that.
Yes.
Running the same arguments that you have been doing, but in the wrong way for us.
Yes. Okay. Well, I won't go over this. Won't go round and round too much in this, because I think, as the inspector said, he's got the point. But this really is a case of, the council has to look at the overall public interest here, and the impact in the public interest, not just on one scheme. You're concerned about your own scheme, and you basically say, well, we're the good guys here. We're doing something. Let us out of this, and you fight it out with the other sides. That isn't the correct approach I'm suggesting to you. Looking at 116, if you've got the framework 116 up, it says development should only be prevented or refused on highway grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety or the residual cumulative impacts on the road network following mitigation would be severe, taking into account all reasonable future scenarios. Now, I'm not going to debate with you what all reasonable future scenarios are. The position is as set out in the evidence now. And what we do have is your own assessment, don't we? And in fact, probably if we took up Ms. Baker's rebuttal, if you've got that to hand.
Yes.
And if you turn to her table 4.5. These are, this is her exercise that she's done, which looks at the residual impacts, yeah? Cumulative impacts. So then we get to the point here, which is what do these represent? Are they severe cumulative impacts or not? Now, again, I've understood that your cases, you keep your sites separately and look at it separately, but if you do it in the way that the council is looking at it, which is cumulatively, with all of them operating together, we do have then, don't we, the increases that she's identified in red at table 4.5.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if she's right, now again, if she's right, I know this isn't your case. If she's right, And the appropriate way to address residual cumulative impact is to consider the increase in journey times between what she's done, which is between do minimum 2031 and do cumulative 2031, if that's the right way. Then there is this increase in journey times between 8:15 and 9:15 on Route 1 of 5 minutes and 37 seconds. So on her case, would you accept that that's severe?
I think it could be perceived as being severe.
That's very fair.
But when making a
I know what you're going to say.
no, sorry, so not just every case should be blah blah blah, but also that it's important to consider the underlying assumptions in the modelling, i.e. is the modelling, this is a forecast, but it's not a prediction, if that makes sense. This is just a forecast of the assumptions that we were required to test, and that's, if you test those assumptions, it gives you this outcome.
Yeah.
This is
You
not,
don't agree that this is the appropriate option.
not just that, but I don't think that the traffic conditions will be as bad as this. This is not my prediction of what would happen if all these developments took place. It's what would happen it's the outcome of layers of overly robust assumptions, worst case assumptions stacked up on top of each other as we were required to model, and it gives you these outcomes. I think these outcomes are exaggerated. The actual impacts would be less than that, but notwithstanding that, if we were just focusing on what it says, then I wouldn't disagree that it could be perceived as being severe.
That's very fair of you, thank you. And that's the first one. She also identifies 2 minutes on Route 2 and just over 90 seconds on Route 4. So all of these also potentially severe?
Potentially, I think you need to look at things in the whole, in the round. So, not just on a linked basis, but the entire network, how it's performing, etc. But I'll just make one point on that. If the council's position, you highlighted the 94 seconds, if that's potentially severe, I'd hope the council would also give due weight to the benefits of the scheme. So in the column adjacent, we've got impacts of minus 241 seconds, minus 286 per second. So these aren't minor benefits, these are substantial benefits as a result of the proposed development. And then I don't think the evidence to the council has given fair balance to the weight of the beneficial impacts of the proposed mitigation scheme.
Yeah, I understand that, but just getting your evidence on these particular impacts, and obviously subsequently there would have to be a balance, but I think you've fairly said that the over 5 minutes you just accept could be severe, and the other two?
Potentially.
Thank you. And if they are severe, and again, accepting completely that your cases run on a different basis, that would enable the inspector to find that the residual cumulative impacts on the road network were severe.
Yes.
Thank you. And in terms of the road network, you made the point about the council, but ultimately it's the strategic road network, isn't it? The works or any scheme that were to be implemented or needed to be implemented on the SRM should be led by National Highways. Would you agree with that?
I disagree. I think it needs to be a joint approach between the council and National Highways. These, after all, are the council's allocations, and there's a lot more the council could and should be doing to work with National Highways, or could have done to work with National Highways to bring forward such an approach. But unfortunately, the council sought not to do that.
But you heard what Mrs. Baker said as well about the risk of financial liability to the council if it were to take the lead on such an approach. Do you dispute that?
I understand that position. I think it's been exaggerated, perhaps to an extent. There's ways that could be worked around, contingencies, ensuring suitable index linking, etc. I also note that there's a slight inconsistency in the council's position, because the council is willing to accept 1 of 6 contributions towards other works, other highway works, for example, the footway cycleway to the south of Tove roundabout. council's happy to accept or would like £250,000 from the applicant, and the council would deliver those highway works. So there seems to be, I appreciate it's a slightly different scale, but the
I
council
mean,
seems
it's
to
a
be
very
open to risk.
significant, different scale, isn't it?
Yeah, but the fundamental principle of the council being exposed to risk, you know, the council hasn't done any utility services, utility surveys down there. It could cost considerably more, could in theory, you know, there could be something down there. And the council would have exposed themselves to that risk. And
But ultimately, we're talking about two different scales of infrastructure, aren't we?
I appreciate that this
Yeah.
scheme is bigger, but this idea of it being exposed to risk, likewise public transport contribution, the council's willing and actually asked for it for a section 106 contribution, and the council will secure and deliver the public transport services. It could cost the council more than what they've asked for. You know, that again, it's a risk that the council seems happy to expose themselves to, but just not when it comes to the proposed mitigation scheme. We have a different.
Well, indeed, and there's nothing that you put forward that would allay those financial risks.
I disagree with that in part. As part of our brainstorming of various ideas to try to come up with a solution, try to help the council, we suggested that DHL, the appellant, would commit to deliver the full works, the full cumulative mitigation scheme, and effectively there'd be rebates if the other AL developments were approved by the council. The council would effectively lower or give back some of the money to DHL. So DHL sought to provide that security that the council would have that full lump sum to deliver the works, to minimise the risk. But the council showed, again, quote unquote, zero appetite.
Yeah.
Just a final point, you know, this issue of multiple developments all having an impact on a singular junction or a singular part of the highway network is not unique to West Northamptonshire. This happens across the country with lots and lots of local plans, and there are ways forward, mechanisms to deliver a cumulative mitigation scheme in a cost-effective way that's fair to all developers, etc., and the highway authorities. But it requires a planning and highway authority, and in this case, National Highways, to jointly work together and to put in the legwork to enable that to happen. In this case, that hasn't happened, and there's no alternative but for DHL to bring forward their own mitigation scheme.
Yeah. And so I think all of that demonstrates how seriously you've taken the issue of severe residual cumulative impact in 2031. So thank you for that. But can I just get your response to this? If things don't work out as you hope once you would have your permission, and we carry on as we are, which is kicking the can down the road. So you get your permission with your mitigation. The other AL sites get built out because they don't cause sufficient harm on their own. And the net result of that will be, I think you accept, a severe residual impact on the highway in 2031. In my scenario.
Yeah, sorry, I think I sort of missed the first bit. I think you were saying that if the other AL developments are approved and mitigation isn't secured from them, there is the
inspector's point that your scheme with mitigation and the others come forward without mitigation, that scheme, that scenario, which is all the sites operating together, and it's not possible to secure mitigation for the others because they don't create a severe impact on their own. The net result of that will be that scenario that you have fairly identified, which is the severe residual cumulative impact in 2031.
Yeah, you know, notwithstanding previous comments, I think it's unlikely, etc. But yeah, no, I think we've sort of covered this a few times now. I don't dispute that argument. Indeed, I'm imploring you to the council to apply that argument to those developments correctly, but it doesn't work on this scheme because we're materially different from them. Hopefully my position is clear on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my answer, yes, and you've given your other imploring and so on. But thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kevin Jones, have you got any questions?
I do so.
And how long? Right, okay. And then okay, so we're gonna have to come back, we're gonna come back to one, but,
I mean, I will obviously look.
yeah, all I was going to say, is I seriously think we've done cumulative impact to that here. I understand the position, so unless there's,
It won't be on those, on that.
all right, there'll be more on,
It'll be on other matters.
right, okay, that's fine. Okay, what sort of time were we looking at? Do you think that just along the way for our time?
Well, I said an hour. I mean, I've got, like I said, I will try and.
Right, okay. But probably
I mean, yeah.
up to an hour. Okay, and then we've got the round table, which hopefully shouldn't be more than, I want to say 15 minutes, but in reality, probably half an hour. So that's an hour and a half. So very tight day tomorrow. Are people thinking in terms of planning witnesses? Are they likely to take the time that we've?
So from my perspective, in terms of cross-examination of Ms Ford, I'd estimate an hour and a half. I can possibly shave that a little bit and get some time off that. There is an issue of diminishing returns in terms of these issues. And certainly I wouldn't, in fact, give no estimate at all in relation to Mr Weeks, it seems, which is an omission on my part. Couldn't imagine not asking Mr Weeks a question, but I won't be repeating cross-examination that I put to Ms Ford. So if you normally say, so it'll be 90 minutes all in for me for cross-examination of the plans, I still think we've got a fair chance of getting to them tomorrow. With Mr Guthrie on Friday. With Mr Guthrie on Friday. What I'd be reluctant to do, sir, would be cross-examined via my disembodied head on the wall on Friday if we end up pushing Mr Weeks into Friday.
Well, I don't think if we push Mr Weeks into Friday, then we're not going to get Mr Guthrie done anyway. So
I should just say one thing that maybe in my haste to get on, I haven't asked Mr. Anderson policy questions because I'm going to deal with those with the planning witness. So I'm conscious that Mr. Anderson does deal with policy matters, but it's not that I've just accepted them. I'll deal with it. I think Mr. Tapper realizes that. And the other thing that I haven't done is to go into great depth on division-led issue because we've had division-led because we've had Mrs. Baker's response on that last week, and I will just make submissions on what is left to say on that. So I hope that's acceptable.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I can obviously put the points to Mr. Anderson, but that's what I didn't express that that's what I'm doing, but that is.
This is not formal litigation. You don't have to put every point to the issue between the parties. And it's only a hack applicant who would take a point in submission that because a point wasn't put for this accepted.
Well, there are some out
You
there.
won't hear that from me as you will.
So that's what I'm planning to do. That's why I've sort of curtailed this as well to some extent.
okay, well, it's what it is, but we've got to make good progress tomorrow.
So what do we envisage happening then? We've got an hour of cross-examination. Then we'll have.
I actually have a few questions for
Mr. Anderson.
Mr. Anderson
Yes.
as well. Some re-examination, no doubt.
So 2.5 hours.
Then we've got this
Round table.
say half an hour.
Half an hour.
That takes us to three.
About 2 hours. I think that takes us to.
2 hours.
If you've got half an hour questions.
Hour, half an hour.
Half an hour round table.
Sorry.
5 minutes.
Yeah, okay.
2
2 hours.
2 hours.
2 hours.
Um,
If we start at 9:30 till morning break.
For a morning break, and
So-
then we call the planning witnesses.
Yeah.
Then, okay.
Ms. Ford, you like this to be an hour?
In chief, hopefully under an hour, but there are points to cover, I think.
Right. Hopefully we should get. Ms. Ford and Mr. Weeks done, shouldn't we? I think we start sounding like you both sounded a week ago when it was, well, hopefully we'll get it done. I was saying, no, we need certainty, but
If we don't get it done on day after tomorrow. No, sorry, I'm going to confuse
Tomorrow.
tomorrow, yes. Have we decided we're coming back on Friday? I can't remember now.
We're definitely coming back on
Friday.
We're
Friday.
definitely coming back on Friday for Mr Guthrie. There's no prospect.
Short of the miracle happening
That's
tomorrow.
fine, yes, okay.
Unless the planners agree, yes, permission should be granted tomorrow. We're definitely coming back on Friday for Mr Guthrie. And that's the first thing.
And also there, we've supposedly got 4 hours of, but that's not just a short on a Friday. Right, okay, well, thank you much, Mr. Anderson. Unfortunately, you'll be aware this leaves you in silence overnight.
Yeah, no, that's understood, it's fine, no problem.
We've actually been planning it, Mr Anderson, so you don't have to dine with us.
Sorry, what did you say?
I said we've been planning it so that Mr Anderson doesn't have the pleasure of dining with us, so.
Right, okay, well, thank you very much for that. We will return then at 9:30 in the morning.
Thank you, sir.